Welcome to Tell This Story, the podcast where we bring you the real, raw conversations about resilience, growth, and purpose after a life of service. I'm your host, Doug White, a veteran, retired first responder, and the author of Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward. On this podcast, we focus on more than just the origin stories and the challenges of service. We explore how veterans, first responders, and their families move forward to thrive. Through honest and thought-provoking discussions, we highlight resilience, perseverance, post-traumatic growth, and the opportunities that can be found in life's next chapter. This episode is proudly brought to you by Polestar Coffee, fueling the brave with the finest blends. Find them at polestarcoffee.com. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Every review helps spread the message and keeps us bringing these stories forward. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Travis Gribble, a retired 24-year law enforcement veteran who has transformed his personal journey into a mission to support first responders' mental health. Travis served in various capacities, including SWAT team leadership in Michigan and in Arizona. He ran the gamut of calls for service and SWAT activations. Throughout his entire career, Travis experienced high-risk, high-reward situations. Like everyone in our line of work, Travis had benchmark experiences, events that marked the time and forever changed him. His path through 24 years of service is a testament to grit, resilience, perseverance, and growth. His experiences and the lessons learned led him to establish My Arena, an organization dedicated to breaking the stigma around first responder mental health. Travis brings his story front and center, unafraid and unapologetic. Joined with culturally competent counselors, Travis brings hope and offers a way forward. Travis has shared his story on just about every platform you may have heard of, and recently on Behind the Shield podcast with James Gearing. Today, he joins us to share his experiences, his advocacy, and his latest work with the Boulder Crest Foundation. Travis, welcome to Tell This Story. Travis, how are we doing today?
I'm good, brother. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, man, thank you. I am absolutely honored that you've taken the time in your busy day to come and sit down with me and the listeners here on Tell This Story. So without anything else, man, I gave a pretty lofty background, but I don't even think I scratched the surface, man. Tell us about Travis Gribble.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Michigan, kind of a smaller town area. Ended up chasing the career in law enforcement because I was introduced by my parents had been divorced, so my mom and I were living in an apartment complex, and I kept seeing this patrol car come into the parking lot, and now I know, figured it out back then. The guy was going to dinner that, worked in the area that he lived, and so he approached me when I was about 18 and said, "Hey, you should come do a ride along. What are you going to do with your life?" And I did so. And I tell the story. I can remember it was just a couple domestics and a drunk driver we took to jail. Got to drive fast a couple times, and I was hooked. And it suited me well. If you asked my mom back when I was a child, I was definitely a Law and Order style kid. I liked things done right. Was always trying to take care of the bullies when they were picking on the weaker of those around us or couldn't defend themselves. And it was just a natural fit. So, and I mean, as much as I wanted to help, I had some things in my childhood where my mom and dad weren't good, saw some things that I didn't like. And so I definitely wanted to help people. And, but I'm not going to play the game and say, oh, that's the only reason. I was an adrenaline junkie. I was looking for the fast, and furious. I can remember the patrol car that I first got assigned. It was a Corvette LT1 engine in it, and it governed stopped out at 132, and you knew it had so much power, but if I could drive 132 miles an hour, that was a good night. And so just crazy stuff like that. And then, yeah, but I worked in a small area. I worked, at first when I started my career, I thought this was going to be, I thought it would be super cool to be the deputy in the town that you lived in this rural community. And no one ever explained how much more difficult that was because, you're going to calls that you're dealing with people that whether it's traffic fatality, a suicide, or you're domestic, or you're having to take someone to jail that that for drunk driving and just all the bullshit that comes with that. So, but it was good. It was great learning experiences for me. But I'd always, kind of wanted to work big city. And I was almost through the process with Las Vegas Metro in 2005. I was going to go there. And I ended up getting into a shooting where I was one of the guys pulling the trigger. And it was a little bit controversial. The guy was, a Vietnam vet, had some people hating me over that. I was cleared right away, but it kind of went on for a while for civil bullshit. So I didn't feel it was a good time for me to leave. So I withdrew and, but never lost that desire. So that desire ended up leading me to Mesa, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, to a totally different environment. Going to a city of 530,000 people, and we had about 900 sworn officers. So bigger city atmosphere and what I was looking for.
Yeah, I'd say so. How big was the agency you left?
I think we had 15 on the road at that time. We managed a jail as well, but yeah, 15. So really small, working a night shift and there's one other deputy on with you, that kind of environment versus going to Mesa. And I'll never forget, like being an FTO there and the first time, and you're just on a simple traffic stop, and all of a sudden you got 4 cars behind you, ready to back you up. I'm like, whoa, what is this? This is amazing. So yeah, different experience.
Yeah, that's good stuff. My time here in the greater Tampa area, we had nights where we were either short or it was that busy, but we'd see our zone partner maybe at dinner if we got to eat. Yeah. But on those slow nights, it looked like a PBA meeting at the parking lot. It's like, man, this is a simple traffic stop. I haven't even gotten on the radio yet, and there's 5 people standing behind me. It's like a parade. It's getting ready to start.
Yep.
I'm sure the driver was scared shitless. Like, man, that's a taillight.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on? Like, yeah, guys, y'all need to leave, man. This is really not helping the tension here. They have no idea that we're just waiting to go to Village Inn or something. So you went to Mesa. You went there, what, in 2008?
Yeah, 2008. So got there in 2008, and it was a good transition. They treated me really well. People that, that aren't police officers that listen to this maybe. So I was certified in the state of Michigan as a police officer, and I just had to take some waiver exams in Arizona. And so they set you up for success to do that. And then I got some really good FTOs that they were older guys, and they were super cool from the standpoint of I'd already been a cop for quite some time, but they weren't trying to change my style of policing. They were just teaching me, hey, this is what, paperwork we have to do for Mesa, obviously some different policies and procedures, et cetera, but just let me be who I was. And I got through that process fairly quickly and then found out on my own on patrol. And I had experience on a regional SWAT team back in Michigan, but man, it was, no offense to them. In fact, I now would not call it a SWAT team. We were more of a containment team, but I thought it was SWAT back then. And it was, we just didn't have many calls for service, right? We were just trying to figure out our way because the only team that our county could call if there was a SWAT incident was the state police. And that takes some time to spin them up to get people to our area. So our sheriff and some chiefs in the county made a good decision, like, hey, we have to have something to lock it down at least until the state police get there. So I had that itch, kind of that in me now. Okay, I like the training. I like this next level. And so when I went to Mesa, I fully intended in chasing the SWAT dream, but I didn't tell anybody that because I was not going to be the new guy that like, oh, I came here to be SWAT. I just kept my mouth shut, learned, listened a lot, found out where all the SWAT guys were working at this time, and because we were part-time at this moment, we went full-time shortly after I made the team and a probationary status. So I went and worked with those guys, became friends, built relationships, learned how they operated. I liked the attitude. I liked the intensity. And so before too long, they were taking me down the path of what I need to do for the team. So that's where I was headed.
That's good, man. The way you did it is mature and the right way to do it. Going to teach the academies, you ask these kids, hey, what do you want to do? Well, in 3 weeks after FTO, I want to be K9. Oh, slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down, man. I want to be SWAT. I want to be this and that, and I want to be homicide detective. It's like, okay, it's good to have those goals, but let's put that in a timeline.
And and I will tell you, going from the smaller to large agency, it really, I never thought about this until I got there after a little bit. Really gave me appreciation for all the things we had at a large agency, having our crime scene, having detective units that come out. Because back in Michigan, we did our own printing. Mm-hmm. We did all the detective stuff. We took the case from beginning to the end. So it'd be kind of funny, the people that had only known the Mesa way, worked for big city, and they'd bitch about the least little things. Oh, crime scene's taking forever. And I just laugh like, you guys have no idea. Like,
It's like, I could
what?
process this scene in
Yeah,
30
like,
minutes,
this
man.
is
We're
a
out of
big
here.
deal. If they gave me the fingerprint stuff, I could do this. Like, it's not a big deal. But so I do, again, I'm not telling anyone to go that avenue. I do encourage people to work for larger agencies. Like my youngest son is on that track right now, just for the opportunities. But the benefit for me going smaller to large is I gained a real good appreciation for the extra we had at the big city police department.
Well, that's good stuff too. And you bring a lot of experience from those other places too, because by the time you get there, you had what, 11, 12 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's
11 years, yeah.
It's a lot of experience coming in. That's quite a gift for Mesa's recruitment and training. You just take a test and you're on. So that's a pretty good deal, man. Especially a benefit for them. They get some outside look at what it's like not at Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. So you did regular patrol stuff, you got SWAT, and then they became a full-time team.
Yeah. So because another thing they do with laterals at Mesa, they will, after you're off probation, they give you your years of experience. At that time, you had to have at least 3 years on before you could test for a specialty. But because I had previous experience, I was able to test once I got off probation. So the way Mesa does is every December, they run tests for the following year, meaning our SWAT schools are always in February. So you were testing in December to see if you'd been invited to SWAT school. And so, I mean, it wasn't easy because I was 38 at the time. So I'm rolling around with a lot of young guys, but I had always kept myself to, working out has always been a part of my life. And it was a challenge for me. Like, hey, I always pushed myself. If that 24-year-old can do it, I'm going to beat him. And that's just my mentality. I still, to that day, one of these days, I'm going to realize how old I am and stop doing that stupid shit. But that's kind of the way that I roll. So yeah, it's just, so I did it. And, I was very fortunate. Yeah, I got brought on. It's called probationary status. That's how our team runs it. So when you become actually a team member through the whole thing, you go through, you get a pen, and then you're now officially a member of the team. But the first year you're on probation, so they can dismiss you off team for anything. And you're being tested the whole time, but different positions, work. I mean, after every training, the team gets together, tells you to leave, and they talk about you, what do you do here? What do you do there? You got to have thick skin, man. So, and this. So, but yeah, so I made the team, and 2 months after, we were busy. At this point, we were running 250 operations a year. And so, quite frankly, the patrol commanders and the patrol units, which most of us worked patrol, that, and SWAT was a collateral duty, they didn't like us because we were never there. We were getting called away. So that affects staffing, right? So I think it kind of came down to two things. Our SWAT lieutenant at that time had enough juice with the chiefs that they respected him, and the patrol commanders disliked us so much. So they did a proposal and said, we want them to go full time. They're off the books. And they just all said, yep, good deal. And we were out. So we got called into a mandatory meeting, pay our phones go off, and everyone's like, what the hell? Like they said, be at Metro, our building. And the chief or our lieutenant told us, yeah, we're going full time. And I think it was 2 months away. So yeah, I'm like, yes. But it was funny in this meeting, my lieutenant called me out there was one other probationary guy, and they told both of us, they said, hey, we're just telling you, if you come off the books. So we had bid for a certain shift, right? So we were working generally where we wanted to. If you come off the books and you don't make through probation, you're getting thrown back out there, and you may work the worst shift ever. But I'm not going to pass up that opportunity.
I ain't ever coming back.
Yeah, let's roll the dice. I'm going for it. So yeah, and it was awesome, man. Yeah, I so blessed to have done that. Things, training, experiences, operations that I never in a million years would have dreamed that I would be a part of. And so definitely a dream come true.
Oh, it's a great block of your career too, man. I was on the bomb squad for just over 7 years, and we tried out for the team. Well, first of all, our SWAT team, I think largest it got, it was a part-time team. It was a regional team though, but 25 operators. So I mean, it was pretty substantial. So we only had at the time 7 bomb techs, and we were a regional team post 9/11, and we had to grow to 10. Well, bomb squad at bomb techs, they stay there until they retire. It's good work. And the training that goes into it, I mean, just like for you guys, there's a probationary period. We had to be on the team if there was an opening, if we made the team in the tryouts. It was a year to a year and a half before the FBI and the Army would give us a school date. So for that year and a half, you were truck bitch, gear bitch, robot bitch. You were the guy that sprayed Febreze and aired out the suits, who did everything that sucked. And just like you, it's a sidebar. And of course, they'd talk about you, but it was great, man. I tell you, even as a part-time team, we were, I think last year I was active. I think we averaged like 260 call-outs a year. And that's parades, Buccaneers games, USF Bulls games, all that stuff. But I love the bomb work, but also being part-time, we had the experience of supervisors didn't like us. So I was an FTO and they wouldn't give me a full-time recruit because all we would do is the recruits would learn the hell out of specialty teams and bomb call-outs, but they weren't really getting the reps on the calls for service. Yeah, they didn't like us. And I understood that when I started going through the ranks and I became a platoon commander. I was like, hey, I've got 5 people on a training day. I can't run a platoon like this, but that was great. If I would love to have gone back at the other ranks because bomb work, that was so much fun, man. It was great. Not good for the whole blast over pressure that I found out about later, but it was really cool when you were getting blown up, just not now. So full-time team, you had an opportunity to get promoted to sergeant and you tested. And of course you made it. What was that transition from the team back to like?
So yeah, it was a big ask. So we had our team at this point we had 3 sergeant team leaders, and any of those team leaders, they had always come up through the team. And so that was our process. The big ask for us was, especially now that we're full time, we had one team leader who was going to retire, another one wanted to promote to lieutenant. So they came to the team and said, we need some guys to test. And it's a big ask because we have everything. I mean, we have take-home cars, we have unlimited overtime, great training, and to go and test for sergeant, our Mesa's policy was you'd have to go back to the street for a year as a patrol sergeant. And then there's no guarantees that you make it back to the team. So you're rolling the dice, but I mean, just being a good team guy. And plus I did want to promote, myself and a couple other guys, we put our, hats in the ring, and I did test very well and ended up getting brought out in the first group in January of 2016. So I mean, the transition was, I honestly didn't mind it because I looked at it from a standpoint, I was going to take my squad, and I had no seniority as a sergeant, so I was going to get brand new people virtually. I was going to do things. I was just going to be the patrol sergeant that I would have always wanted.
I love that.
Part of that was I was going to take them to a level of training as high as I could get them in a street sense. And so I was creating, I'd work with the other sergeants, bring guys in early. Hey, we're going to do high risk stops, or we're going to do immediate action teams, and it was just stuff because those things, thankfully, because all the experience I got on the SWAT team, those things were just second nature to me. And these guys, like, I just had some hard chargers.
I'm sure they were thirsty for that, man.
Man, they were just like sponges. Some of them I had to grab by the collar and pull back, which I always, the old saying, I'd much rather do that than having to push you to do work. But I had a blast, man. And some of these guys are still, man, I don't know. And the length of time, there's quite a few people that came to my squad, ended up going out for the team and made the team. So that makes me so proud because they're like, yeah, we want to be there. And now we're in that period because I still talk to a lot of my brothers there. And these guys that were just my youngsters, they're now promoting to sergeant. So to watch them, and I hear they're doing the same things that I did, like they're taking the patrol squad up to this other level. And I could not be more happy about that because that's what you'd want, right? Like, yeah. I'm wanting them to just excel. I want them to do better than I ever did. And so it's just been fun to watch them do that and just become the officers, the sergeants they're now becoming. It's been awesome to watch.
That's the best thing. That's the legacy that we leave, man. When our troops get to a point where they start leading, they see something, whether it's a personnel issue or a performance issue or a family issue, whatever it is, because you invested in them, they're like, man, I know what this looks like. And somebody did this for me. I can do that for them. And Man, that's huge to me. That is, I've always considered that the privilege of leadership.
Yeah.
And I got lucky when for us here, corporal was the first level of leadership, of supervision. Then you had sergeant, lieutenant, of course. It follows rank structure everywhere else. But when I made corporal, I was on the bomb team for a little bit after that, and then I had to make the decision. I can either be this guy that's been on the bomb team 25 years, or I can be in leadership and make the larger impact. And I chose the larger impact. But it was cool because when I left the team, I was on midnights, just like you, with a very, very young squad. I think I had anywhere from 3 weeks away from their FTO right up to 2 years. I think about 2.5 years was my senior guy. Yeah. But we had one guy, he came back out to the street, and he was an old SWAT guy. So we teamed up, and when I left the bomb team, I may or may not have kept my entry shield. But anyway, so we put that stuff to good use, and we took opportunities to train. Like if we found an open door at a grocery store, well, that's 16 hallways, that's 32 T intersections, that's mirrors on the ceiling, and it's 3:00 in the morning. There's nothing else going on. Bring the entire squad over here and let's practice moving on hallways and T intersections. And so it was really great. And I know the kids, because I'm an old man now, I know the troops, they loved that stuff. And from what I understand, they're still doing that stuff today. That's the legacy. That's the gift that just keeps on giving. So you go back out to patrol as a sergeant, and everything's moving right along, but you're away from the team. But having heard, I would love to say every episode and interview you've done, I've heard a dozen, but that doesn't even scratch the surface of the amount of interviews and speeches that you've done. What was so important about 2016 that leads you into where you are today?
Yeah. So the way Mesa runs it is they call it the STEP program for sergeants. So you make the list and then they bring you out in groups and you get assigned a training sergeant. So I did just that. It's much like the field training process for a new officer. They're going through checklists and you have to meet certain standards, et cetera. So my first day on the job in this training program, it was January of 2016. So I report to this day shift crew and, going to start the process. And we went through briefing that morning, and there was no calls holding for the sergeants because sergeants we didn't take calls. We just supervised, and did stuff. So patrol, they broke from briefing, went out, started, tackling the calls that were holding, from night shift. And we went down to the office, myself and the training sergeant. We were just working on administrative things, going through, how do you approve vacation? How do you approve reports? Just working on the administrative BS that comes with being a patrol sergeant. And so I heard a call kick out on the radio where an individual, he would not identify himself and he would not tell his location, but he said he had been in an apartment in the city of Mesa, and he did give that location. He said he had met up with a gentleman on some online thing to meet up with this guy for sex at his apartment. And after they got done doing their thing, this guy offered him said, hey, I also have a little girl here if you're interested in her. And this guy, thankfully, he had some sort of a conscience, and he said, no, I'm not into that. So he left, and he thankfully called 911. But again, he wouldn't give his name or anything. And I'll be honest with you, Doug, working in a place with high volume of calls, you get some weird shit on the radio.
Yeah.
And I was not, this was just another Monday in Mesa. Like, okay. So I was listening, but when we don't have his name or whatever, I'm like, is this guy BSing or whatever? Yeah. So I was listening. They were assigning patrol people. But then a heads up patrol officer, he ended to just be in the area. He wasn't even assigned to this call. And he stops this. We describe him as a tweaker, just a drug type user in our area, just in a nasty city park. And this guy seemed to be uncomfortable. So the patrol guy stopped him, just was going to check him out, see what's going on. And he definitely had like his hand up to his ear, like he's on the phone. So this guy, like he's making a phone call. Excuse me. When he checked out with this guy, there was some bleed over from the dispatch traffic, and dispatch said, hey, you're out with this caller about this call at this apartment complex. And so now we had this guy.
That's crazy.
No, it's like, I believe it's some sort of divine intervention or something is what I have a lot heavier beliefs than that, but that's just a broad stroke of that. And so We figured this out. This patrol officer does. Now we have him identified and have a location. He starts giving more details. So when I hear this, I answer up, and I'm going to be the patrol sergeant that takes this. And I had already worked it out with this guy. You know, you can have, we call them limbo days, to where you're not really doing anything. You can just watch the patrol sergeant. But I said, nope, I want to take it full on first day. Let's get through this process as quickly as possible. I want it all. So yeah, I was taking the call. You're probably not surprised in that. Like, you
Nope.
probably think the same
Not
way.
at all.
So yeah,
Yep.
let's just get after it. Yep. So I took the call. We went to this apartment complex where this supposedly happened, and we met up. The patrol, or the apartment complex, was set up to where all the windows and doors faced this courtyard, so there was no back windows. So we could get, and it was a huge complex. We could end up and talk in the corner, you know, with all the people assigned. Like, hey, let's come up with a plan. There was some debate about whether we even had reason to go up to the door. I know there was a lieutenant there that him and I have never saw eye to eye. He was a guy that did not care for SWAT, because he always, you know, didn't even like to call us, because we'd always come up there and, you know, whatever, blow shit up, take forever, gas houses. And so it just extended his call for service, right? Quite frankly, that's what we got to. But at this point in my career, I was a pretty cocky SWAT guy, and I didn't, you know, I respect that you have bars on your collar, but I'm also going to have a healthy opinion. And so eventually I wore him down, and he finally said, fine, you know, you go. Because my argument was, hey, we can just do a knock and talk. Let me just go knock on the door. Let's see what's going on. Because some of it was still a little vague, but I said, we have every right to go see what's going on here. And so he said, fine, Gribble, you're the SWAT guy. Go take some patrol people, decide what you want to do. And so I did that. And I, you know, just came up with a little plan that a couple guys were going to be in front of me. They were going to cross cover on the door and knock. I just told them, I said, let's see what happens when that door opens. I will make a decision when that door opens, or if it doesn't, I got it. And so I was
the old foot in the door.
Yeah, whatever we got to do. Like, I'm not afraid to respond to something like that. We have to look into it. So they knocked, and almost immediately the door opened, and there was a male individual with makeup on and dressed in a pink ballerina like outfit. And that was exactly how that guy had described. So that was enough for me. I said, detain him. And he didn't say anything. He didn't fight. It went ahead. We got him secured and handed him off to some support officers behind us, and he was handcuffed. And so then I just told him, I said, hey, make some announcements, you know, Mesa, obviously, you know, City Mesa Police Department, anyone inside, you know, call out to us. If you can't come to us and you're hurt, please tell us. We did that. No one said a thing. And I said, hey, we're going in. We're looking just for a body or someone in harm's way. Exigent circumstances. We believe that someone's inside there. And so pushed into the apartment. The first two guys in front of me, they started pushing forward, but I noticed a closed door off to my right. So I said, I will cover you on that door. Called in for support officers, and I said, you guys go ahead and finish. I got this door until we're done. It's closed. So we'll deal with that one last. And so they did so, came back. They said, hey, boss, we got nothing. You know, it's just a shitty, nasty drug apartment, but we didn't see any evidence of any little girls, any bodies, anything like that. Well, I said, this door was like a small closet door. So I said, stand off the side. I got it. Obviously, I had my pistol out. I opened it, and I did so. And obviously, you know, started clearing it. It wasn't like a coat closet, but it was a storage area with just a bunch of shit knee high throughout the whole thing, about 5 or 6 feet deep. It was like in a separate storage area for these apartments. And so I scanned the first time, didn't see anything. I scanned the second time, and for some reason, nope, I'm not going to minimize that. Divine intervention definitely caused me to look at this black trash bag that was not the only trash bag in there. But for some reason, I got to see what's up with that. I holstered, reached down. As I'm grabbing it, simultaneously, a little girl's head pops out of the bag. And bound across her mouth with gray duct tape, and her hands or wrists are bound, and she's sitting. This bag is full of her own feces and urine. She's been kept in here, but she's alive. I can see her blinking, but she has zero expression. So obviously, I grab her up, and right away, you know, I'm telling the guys, get on the radio. We already had fire and medical on standby to get them up to us. And we got the tape off and started that process of getting her care. That was the only concern at that point. I can tell you, this squad that I was with, None of them had less than 20 years on patrol, very senior squad. I obviously had my experiences, and we had never experienced anything like that. There was almost this dead silence where, from calls that we go on, there's never usually just dead silence. You're like usually doing shit, but we just went to work, but no one was saying anything, and we looked at each other with like a blank stare. My immediate reaction after we got her square, I'll be honest with you, Doug, I wanted to go pull my gun and shove it in that dude's mouth and, end his life right there. Because even when we came outside, there was no expression he was blank. It was definitely the most evil I've ever seen in my life. And I was staring right at it. And we obviously know what all that was. We know what was being done there. Unfortunately, there's lots of video evidence, all sorts of stuff that it was a long investigation. He thankfully is in prison. I wish he would have been there longer. The unfortunate, nasty part is her mom was dropping her off there. This wasn't even a relative because this guy would give her drugs. And so she would leave her little girl there for weeks at a time, and just unspeakable things were done to her. So I did what Travis does. I sucked it up because I believe that that's what we do. I bought into that culture. I was the person that always thought that if you said anything bothered you, that you were weaker and you would not succeed. And at times I wasn't even, if I saw people struggling with a call, I'd say, hey, you probably chose the wrong profession, suck it up. Even though if I look back now, which I do, I definitely look back for reflection. All that shit had already been adding up. The suicides I've been on, the fatalities, the homicides, all of it had already been taking its toll, but I had no idea what it meant to take care of myself, because I thought my only role is to take care of, from whether it's my family around me or my brothers and sisters on the shift or the community that I serve. That's what I did. And I just bought into like, hey, this just is what it is. This is what we chose, and was not good. So yeah, that was, I call it my life-changing call. Now I want to tell everyone here, because I always do this when I go out and speak. So this little girl is happy, alive, safe, and very loved as we stand right now. Thankfully, she had to go through a process. If you can, everyone can imagine that a lot of injuries. She was in Phoenix Children's Hospital for quite some time, but ultimately the first foster care family that took her in ended up adopting her. And so she has been with them. And then I'm in connection with a group that has watched over her, providing unbelievable care, and will do that for the rest of her life, actually. And this was a pretty big call. It made all the major news networks in Phoenix area and all this stuff. So, lots of people came to help her, but I just saw a picture of her not too long ago, and I have it. And she's a beautiful little girl, and she's thriving. Obviously, we all know she's going to have shit to deal with probably the rest of her life, but everyone's doing everything they can to take care of her. So I want everyone to know that, because I know that's hard to hear that story.
No, and I've heard it, and I've heard that story a dozen times, but I've never received it face to face with you. I mean, it's always been your voice and always seeing you, but never. Yeah, man, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how much of my book you've been through, but I talk about the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of the vignettes that I use in there called The Devil, the Angel, and the Duffel. Similar thing with it, where she was a toddler. She was being abused, and mom was there, didn't do anything about it. Yeah, I can relate, because the guy that I had to deal with that day, the monster that had done not even a fraction of what happened to Ruby. Yeah, I was clear about it that day. I was clear about it in the book, and I maintain that now. 16 years later, I would have put my pistol in his mouth to the breech. I'd pull the trigger as I smiled. No problem with it at all. So I can understand that level of rage. And the worst part is, what do we do with that? We drive on, we push it down, we suck it up, and we go home and we try to be fucking normal. But what is that? Your normal and my normal are not what other people would consider normal. This conversation between you and I, these are conversations that we have at a diner having coffee.
Mm-hmm.
That people 2 tables away from us, if they overhear that, will never, never be right. It's amazing to me the resilience, the perseverance that first responders have in dealing with something like that and being able to compartmentalize it and move forward. And we move to the next one, and we think it's going to get better if we just make this next benchmark. If we, like you, if I get back to the SWAT team, me, if I'm a captain or get to day shift, there's always that next benchmark that we're looking forward to, and we try to outrun it, and that does not work. To a point, it works. But you said there was a lieutenant there who probably could have used a little bit of brushing up on legal guidelines and search and seizure, and that the fact that you have a guy that made an anonymous complaint is no longer anonymous. But whatever. We're not going to talk about the finer points of the Fourth Amendment. But what was your command structure? What was your reaction to this? Did they say, hey, everybody, let's come in and talk about this? And I know the answer to this, and I know the response that I would have gotten were I in that position at that time. But what was your experience with that?
Unfortunately, at this time at Mesa Police Department, the only thing we had that even touched any mental health stuff was an EAP thing, or you had peer support, right? Yeah. And that was it. So as I reflect back now, obviously we missed a lot of things. We did have to go to a mandatory debrief, and it was one of those things where 2 days later, everyone that had touched the case, from dispatchers to firefighters to patrol to on and on and on, we met in this room, and they go through a whole process. And then, does anybody want to share? Well, no one shared, and I couldn't wait to get out of that door. And that was it, to be quite honest with you. Did someone ask, you guys are good? I don't remember. I'm sure someone said, are you good? But of course I was going to be good.
Yeah.
That's what
the answer is good to go. Yeah.
Right. Because I got it. Because the only thing I'm thinking on this day is I got 364 more days to get back to my team. So I just got to get through that. And the structure, or the culture that I had bought into and my team was bought into at that time, which is vastly changed now, that, hey, if you can't handle this shit, like, you chose the wrong profession, you sure can't be a SWAT team leader if you can't handle that kind of stress. I obviously know differently now. I mean, yeah, you look back, there were press conferences done, the chief saying, this was the worst thing he's ever seen in 32 years. I have the newspaper clipping. And yet you would think, now, especially as I see things I do now, we would be like, first of all, you guys aren't coming back to work tomorrow. We're getting you some care, and we need to make sure you're okay. But we were all back to work at 0600 the next day. I know I drank a lot that night. I'd just been through a divorce about the previous year. So I was by myself because I had my kids a week on, a week off. I remember sitting there on my couch in this stupid little apartment, staring at the TV and drinking bourbon like it was freaking ice water. Because I was trying to numb myself, because I'm like, I got to get to sleep. I got to work tomorrow. And I know I don't want to go to sleep right now, because all I'm going to see is her face when I picked her up out of that bag. So yeah, there was nothing done, man. And you know how it is. This was 2016, bro. There was nothing. Can't believe that was 8 years ago, but man, we were 8 years, 9 years.
It goes by fast as we get older.
Yeah, it does, man. But to think about, things, we still have a long ways to go, but things have obviously changed. Mesa PD would not do that now. I know that. And, but we just didn't know any better, man. And so I pulled my big boy britches up, per se, and said, I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to keep pushing forward. And when it gets too tough, I'm going to drink. And yeah, these stupid, what I thought were childish nightmares were happening. Like, who am I going to tell that to? And, oh yeah, if I can't get this worked out, I definitely can take my own life. I know exactly how I do it. So the suicidal ideations, and I just coped, man, and not a great way. I was, I now know, dealing with a lot of depression that manifested its way, and, itself in anger, whatever. You can go the whole gamut, but I just didn't know. I had no knowledge of what the fuck was going on with me. I didn't know. I thought I was weak. I thought, I'd go to a call. I tell the story specifically after I got out of the training program, and I had my own squad. We had 2 murder-suicides within a month, and it was children involved. And I handled it. Doug, if you'd ask my lieutenant, like, yeah, Travis is a rock star. He knows what he's doing. No problem. I don't even have to go to these calls. I did all my shit on scene, then go in my car in the corner and I'm freaking crying. I'm like, what the hell? What is wrong with me? Like, this is not appropriate. Like, you're failing is what I was telling myself. So yeah, I just didn't deal with it, man.
No, I'm with you, man. It's when you have a call like that, and first I need to go back up a little bit. These are the things that we experience as first responders and veterans and military personnel. This is not always a one-time event. This is cumulative. This is chronic acute trauma. It is lack of sleep. It's being choked out in training. It's gunfire in the shoot house. It's breaches. It's bashing your head in a car crash, or when you tackle a bad guy in an open field tackle that's running from you. These are the things. These are neurological and physiological changes that are happening to our bodies, or these are natural responses to a natural stimulus. And this is our body's way of trying to protect us and keep us to survive. And we tell ourselves, just like you just said, I did too, man, you're not strong enough to do this. Maybe this isn't the job for you, the profession for you. And you start thinking to yourself, man, what else can I do? I'm weak. I can't handle this. And you keep trying to drive on, get to the next goalpost or whatever it is, and just try to either make it to the pension or just to the end of the day so you can be done. And they just keep coming one after another. There's no reset time. There's no good sleep. You add the alcohol, and that makes it even worse because now you're really not getting any good sleep. And on top of that, you've got to pay for expensive bourbon because I don't drink the cheap shit. So it starts getting out of hand really quick, and you start buying into your own shit. Then it starts a self-deprecating talk. I'm weak. I can't handle my shit. But the people on the outside, they don't see us the way that we see ourselves. In my case, I was high performing, man. I was winning at everything I did. Nobody knew, but I was a dumpster fire for a long time. And I look back on when all my stuff started now with the benefit of hindsight and being on my own healing journey. It came to a boiling point, but there were signs back in 05, 06, 07, and leading up to all of this stuff and the great successes of my career. But after this call, you were able to maintain, well, professionally, you were able to maintain and keep driving for 5 years. That's why in your intro, I talked about grit and not resilience, because I think resilience is a good term, but resilience means returning back to a normal shape. There's always going to be a new normal at the end of each day. We've pushed our limit a little bit further. I know Andy Stumpf talks about it. Jocko talks about this. Everybody in this space that you and I get our influences from, they talk about changing that new normal, always adding, and there's a new benchmark every day. So I like to use the word perseverance because we keep driving, but like a rubber band, we get stretched too far, and there's going to be a limit. And you reached your limit in 2021, and it wasn't like a day off where you just said, you know what, that day in 2021 was a pretty shit day, man. You're hard pressed to find anybody that had a day like that, especially driving on as hard as you did and as successfully as you did outwardly, of course, for 5 years, man. What was that? What was that last day like? What was the final decision?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I do. I mean, I pushed through, not healthy by any means, but I was
it's wholly
thriving.
unhealthy.
Yeah, I was thriving professionally, and that was one of my coping mechanisms. I just work more. I always had to be there for the team, and I was doing okay. But I knew inside, especially as you look back now, like I see, man, these little things that I was a different person. And then, yeah, in 2021, I was now back to the team. I was a team leader, and that day, crazy enough, I had finally been convinced by my wife, Emily, my now wife, Emily, who she's done internet crimes against children, and her unit was going to see a culturally competent therapist. And I had been pushing it off, but she knew I was struggling. But she wasn't threatening to leave me or anything like that. She just was out of concern. She's like, I want you to experience some peace, And I was in Phoenix for the first time I was going to be with this therapist. and my phone goes off with a barricade back in Mesa. And so I just canceled. I'm like, nope, got to go be there for the team first always, right? And canceled that appointment and flew back to Mesa. We go handle simple suspect barricade, 3 or 4 hours, gas the guy out, really without incident, get him into custody. And we broke from there after we did our debrief on scene, and I was home for about 45 minutes. And I get a call from the on-call SWAT lieutenant that said there was a hostage rescue we needed to handle. And a little girl, the basics of the call was the little girl in the house. And this was a nice part of Mesa, like very affluent area, East Mesa, we called it, just a nice area. She had escaped her house, but she had already been shot and badly beaten. And the suspect was her father, but also still left in the house with her mom and 18-year-old sister. So we've got obviously a hostage rescue style, incident here. And because, Doug, and the listeners, whether you're a police officer or not, but yeah, there's a couple types of entries. We call them a deliberate plan, where we have time to plan for explosive breaches and, have, more on our terms. We're taking the fight more on our terms versus what we call it a hasty plan, which means we don't have a lot of time to plan for this because this person's ready to commit violence or they already have. And so that's where I knew we were going that route, because with him already committing this violence, like we needed to get on the horse here and act. So arrive on scene. As soon as I put enough people together, we go ahead and do a stealth to contact into the backyard to go ahead and do a shotgun breach on the patio window, because we didn't, that's what we decided to do. And that went flawlessly. But unfortunately, when we entered inside, we were too late. It was a very difficult scene to walk into. There was a lot of blood, and the suspect, and including the mother and the 18-year-old, we ended up finding them dead, which, it was difficult on a whole lot of levels. I want to say, it was the breaking point for me, because there'd been a lot of stuff happening on the team. We had been busy. I mean, a lot of high profile calls, shootings, and this was all during just the craziness of COVID, and the BLM riots had been going. I mean, we were hurting. Yeah. We were just hurting. And this was the culmination for me. And I've since found out how difficult that scene was for multiple other guys on my team that had never shared it. I knew some had shared with me that we talked about it, because we had pretty good success with hostage rescues. I'll just leave it at that. And I know for me, I'll speak for myself personally, I had every intention we were going in there to kill that suspect, and we were gonna get there in time to save the mom and the 18-year-old sister, and we did not do so. And I immediately took on blame on myself. I had it. I was at the end, man. I didn't want to go on. And so my wife obviously knew this. The next day was pretty heavy when we came back into work, all sorts of shit. And she's like, no more. She said, for once, you're going to take care of yourself. You're not going to worry about the team. You're not going to worry about the department. You're not going to worry about the community. You're going to take care of Travis. And so I said I need some time off, and I got, thankfully, back in with this therapist the next day. She moved some stuff around because I was at a breaking point. I didn't want to live. Just to give it, just in simplest terms, my cup had overflowed and I could not stop the flow. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that call, man, first of all, 2 SWAT operations in a day, not unheard of, but I would imagine in the Mesa sun for 3 or 4 hours in a standoff, gassing somebody. I used to hate going to those calls after they gassed an apartment or a house, because it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to be stuck on your neck every time you sweat for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in your clothes. You don't reset after that. And then 45 minutes after your debrief and refitting, you're back at it again for something like that. And even with an empty cup, man, that's a shit call. I wish I had better words for that. That is just all the bad things that can happen at one time have happened. And what's even more amazing to me is you have an entire SWAT team that wasn't taken offline, at least for a day. You went back to work the next day in 2021. I mean, that's again, not unheard of, and I've seen it happen enough in my time, but I want to back up a little bit. There's a couple of things that I want to unravel there. You talked about suicidal ideation, and I know people don't want to talk about that. And I've heard you say this before. Oh, we can't talk about it because then they'll want to do it. We all know that's bullshit. But it is uncomfortable to talk about. And I've gotten criticism from a couple of people, and it's like, hey, how come you weren't tough enough to do this? Or nobody, of course, to my face. It's all keyboard, stupid shit. So people will say, why weren't you tougher? Why couldn't you just done this or suck it up or any of that? But for people who have been in a position where they are done and who do that for years and have the mindset of it's better that I'm not here, or that I've become a burden on my family because I'm a loser, or the only thing that I feel called to do and that I do well, I'm not strong enough to do. There's a lot of things that go into to getting to that point. And if you've never been to that point, you don't understand it. So for me, and I know some of your story, but if you would just some of the ideation stuff, was there any habits that went along with that stuff, like a risk-taking behavior? Because I can tell you for me, man, there wasn't a fight that I didn't go to, a shooting, a stabbing I didn't go to. There wasn't a foot chase or a fight I wasn't involved in. I used to track with canine as a lieutenant, walking through the woods with a dog and another dude looking for a bad guy. If it was kicking in the door or being on point, it was me. I had a wife and kids at home, and I didn't factor into any of that shit. Just always had to be the guy. If anybody was going to be hurt, it was going to be me. It was just, it got real bad for a long time there. What was it like on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely had an attitude of begging for that high risk stuff.
Yeah.
I almost salivated at it. And when I'd hear those calls kick out, almost an unhealthy attitude of going towards it. And then, I mean, my whole thing was from the standpoint of this pain, I do not know how to get rid of it. And everything I was doing was not working. Excuse me. So riding my Harley, I would think, hey, 100 miles an hour into the front of that semi or that truck, I won't feel a thing. And people just think I had an accident. Or, you go to a suicide call, or I'd see my gun and I'd say, well, I know how I'd do suicide because I've seen how it doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is how I would do it. And the reason, you know what I think, Doug, because you heard me about, we can't talk about it because it push people. That's completely been debunked. But the reason I'm so willing to talk about it now is because I've had the privilege of speaking across the country and meeting people from everywhere. When people hear me tell that side of it, and a lot of times they won't say it in front of other people, they'll either message me afterwards, or I've had people wait till everyone else leaves and they come up to me in tears like, I thought I was the only one that felt like that. I had no idea, and I thought I was messed up. Because a lot of times in our profession, I used to go to suicide calls on the job, and I'd be like, what an asshole. I can't believe you did that to your family. I can't believe you checked out like that. You're a punk. You're too weak. And then when you start having those feelings, you've been preaching that for years and years. And then you also think, well, who am I going to tell this to? Because if I go to my command staff, you just hear the horrors of like, oh man, you're going to get committed for 72 hours, or they're going to take your weapons.
Yeah.
And there's just so much. I mean, it's from a 2023 report, which this is so, when I hear any like executive leadership not want to talk this, and I don't agree with everything the IACP says, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, but some stuff they do, and they put out a suicide prevention report. They specifically talk about suicide and how we need to talk about it, address it. I mean, there's no questions asked. It is a part of our community. You can go and you want to keep hiding from it. It is. I mean, you see it because you're on all the stuff I am now. Unfortunately, we get reports, it seems weekly, of like this officer committed suicide. And these are the ones getting reported. And we're not talking about the firemen that don't get reported, the dispatchers that don't get reported. And
the single vehicle traffic crashes that don't get reported. Yeah.
The correctional officers that don't get reported. We have a problem. Okay. It's like, Houston, we have a problem, but either we can bear our head in the sands, which I'm refusing to do, or we can address it. And I think there's ways out. I think we just need to be more open and talk to it. or talk about it and have courageous leadership saying, we would understand why this might be a thought process for you. If that's the case, if you're not suicidal, if you haven't made the plan, we don't have to have knee-jerk reactions. Let's get you, you're obviously in this point because there's something we need to help you with, and we're going to give you that help, right? So that's why I refuse to be silent. I've had those people talk to me about, man, you're always talking about the suicide stuff. Yep, I sure am, because I just yesterday got another report, whatever, a Chicago police officer on duty took his own life. Would we not talk about it? I don't know. So.
Yeah, if you don't talk about it, it'll go away on its own, or because if you're not looking for it, you won't see it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because I know that you've been talking about your story, and I actually experienced the first time I actually said any of this out loud outside of my wife and my own therapist. Just this past June, I was able to give remarks at the Camaraderie Foundation. They're a foundation here in Tampa that pays for transition assistance and mostly mental health therapies for veterans and first responders here. It doesn't report to your insurance. It does not report to your employer. It's safe. They helped me because I didn't go to my office. I went to the EAP for marriage counseling because that's the only thing it's for. Because I don't have a problem. Our marriage has a problem because we're not communicating, or my kid's not adjusting well to middle school. That's what the EAP is for, because we don't trust it. And that says a lot about the first responder culture itself. Anyway, the Camaraderie Foundation asked if I would give some remarks at their annual PTS fundraiser, their breakfast. And I did. And it's the first time I'd said those words out loud outside of my wife. And it's something we didn't always talk about. And I got up there and I just gave my story and where I was and what the foundation had done for me. And man, I've got 2,000 hours speaking in front of classrooms all across the country. I have no problem talking to people. But I was cottonmouth. My heart was racing like a little bunny rabbit. My ears were ringing, which they generally do, but normally I hear what's going on. But I didn't hear a word coming out of my mouth, man. And looked over and I see my wife, Michelle, who has been with me every step of this journey for 25 years now. And she's sitting down in her chair at our table, and the CEO of the foundation sitting there holding her hand, and they're both in tears. And everything gets done, and a guy comes up to me, and it's probably 75 people, 100 people in a room, whatever. There's a sheriff from Central Florida with a bunch of his command staff at one table. I'm like, sucks. And then it's veterans and family members and survivors. And this guy comes up to me, shakes my hand, and then hugs me and says that he still has the bullet. And I'm like, we need to work on our terminology. What do you mean you still have the bullet? And he told me his story. He was Navy vet. He actually had the gun to his head, pulled the trigger. Striker hit the primer and the round didn't go off. And he still has the dimpled primer, the full round with the dimpled primer. And he's talking to me about his story. And I'm like, this is incredible, man. The power of honesty, the power of truth. And I don't want to say it's courage, because I don't know that it was courageous for me to get up there, but I felt so good about myself after I did that. I felt like I had a power over anything that I had experienced, and I could weather anything that came my way. And I wonder, applying that to what you're doing now, and I wonder if not in 2024, 2025 timeline, if you went back to that room in January of 2016 and somebody in that room said, I have a problem with what happened yesterday, I want to talk about it, what do you think would have happened? I mean, I would like to think that everybody in the room would say, well, thank God, now I have permission to say something. Or if they would have crucified him. Because there had to be somebody in that room other than Travis Gribble thinking, God, I wish somebody has a problem. Somebody please give me permission to have a problem with this.
Right. Well, I mean, if I want to get real deep into that, it should have started with me, right? Even though I was a training sergeant, right?
Or we don't know any better than, man. We're in the picture. We can't see the picture.
No, if the sergeant was training me, but yeah, definitely if one person is willing to speak, and that's, if you get down to what you and I are doing, that's what we're trying to do. If we can, every event that I do, when I first started, I got all nervous about, and what if only so many people show up, or what if nothing works, or whatever. And I just created this way of thinking that if I can help one person, it was worth everything.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah, right. So I've been blessed. And that's why I'm not just sharing my story to tell a story, right? Excuse me. I'm sharing my story because I hope it gives someone else the strength to say, well, if he can talk about it, I can. Right. And I don't care. It doesn't have to be in this venue or like writing a book like you have or whatever. I hope that gives the courage to you're standing around having coffee at 3:00 in the morning with your squad mates. And one of them says, hey, man, I struggle with that call. We took a couple hours. Like, is anyone else? And, we begin the conversation. So, yeah, I think that's at the core of what we do.
Yes,
If
sir.
we're trying to create change, it's creating courage amongst our professions that they are like, okay, saying, and command staff supports it. I'm okay to saying, I got to take a knee for a second because that one just kicked my ass. And that's when we surround our brothers and sisters and we pick them up and like, yep, we got you. Maybe, and it doesn't have to be, maybe that one didn't affect the other person, but it affected me. And I'm not the judge. Trauma and how you deal with it is all in the eye of the beholder, right? It's what affects you may not affect me. And that's what we have to remember. We try to put this hard black and white definition on what exactly does this look like? I don't know. It's different for everyone. So just accept it. That's the way it is, So that's
it's not a competition, man. It's not a competition.
No.
And the only barrier to entry to getting help is saying, I need help. You don't have to have, I had 15 homicides. Well, you can't have a problem. You need 18 homicides. No, that's right. All bullshit, man, because you know as well as anybody else that we all come to this profession and our professions with our own baggage. Our cup is full to one extent or another, or filling when we get here. Right. And we're doing the best that we can to make sure nobody else's cup gets overfilled. So in 2021, I heard the phrase culturally competent counseling from you for the first time. And I've been using it, hopefully not overusing it, but I understand what you're talking about. And I actually spoke with Jason Palomero on one of my first episodes. He wrote Living Blue with Barbara Rubel and asked him about compassion fatigue and all those things. But you did not have, for your first trip out going to the EAP, you didn't have any real success until you got with somebody culturally competent. And when you retired in 2021, and I don't want to brush over that, but I want to get to your pivot because this is exciting, man. You got to the point, you decided, what? It's time to retire because Emily said, you got to take care of Travis. But even though you did that, you were still helping everybody else with My Arena. Where did that come from? I know the famous speech, and I think it's about as rock and roll as it gets. That is a speech that should inspire every warrior. That is the ultimate off to anybody who's got opinions. If you haven't stood here, if you're not dirtied and bloodied, your opinion doesn't matter to me. Watch this. And I love every bit of that, man. So tell me, what is My Arena?
So where that came from was that the culturally competent therapist that I was connected with through Emily, she knew that one of my biggest hurdles was the shame that I was feeling. When I came forward, news travels, I had command staff being, I thought Travis was the big SWAT guy. He's having to take some time off, all the nonsense, right? And I was struggling with it. Excuse me. And so he created a meditation event for myself and a couple other just awesome, amazing men that were in the midst like I was. And we went over that speech. We meditated on it, and we went through some symbolic events of where we let it go. And we recited that, and we said, hey, it's our arena. Nobody else has been in it. No one else has been Travis from birth on and dealt with my childhood, dealt with the profession, went to all the calls that I did, felt the way that I felt, end of story. And walking out of there, and I'm not going to say I was perfect, not to say that I didn't still battle shame at times, but that's what I always come back to. It's right on my wall behind me. That's what became my purpose. And then, from when I was going to create this organization, there was no questions asked. Like, it's going to have to be something around that. And that's how I came up with My Arena, because everyone you have your own arena. I have my own arena. That's how it is. So I thought my arena was just an appropriate, I guess, respect to what I went through and where I was headed.
That's amazing, man. And what exactly is it y'all do? And I want you to share that with the listeners, because this is, I think this is the future, man. Because now, go ahead, you tell them, I'll give my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I'm just excited.
No.
I don't want to get ahead of you.
Yeah, just to get, so the way I even started doing what I do, speaking publicly, other departments, conferences, and we can get into what I do for Boulder Crest now. But I was, my wife and I had bought 14 acres up in Montana when I retired. My intent was to go up there and exit from society, per se. It was a little 900 person town way up in the mountains. And I had a construction job all lined up, and I was going to go up there and just kind of get off the map. I had one experience before I officially retired where I told my team, I shared my story with them. And I was, to say I was shocked was probably an understatement, because after I shared my story, some people met with me in tears and they said, Travis, I know exactly what you're talking about. I thought I was the only one. And so I had this glimmer of like, man, just by sharing my story, like people, so it was in the back of my head. Well, I had an offer on the way up to Montana. I was literally driving a trailer full of our stuff, and a buddy of mine that I knew from the national SWAT community, he had retired out of Eastern Washington in the Tri-City area, and then he was now an undersheriff in Montana. He said, hey man, I know you're moving to Montana. There's a leadership conference for SWAT team leaders up here. Can you come up and do a debrief? These guys don't get the same kind of calls you do, so it'd be good for them to hear from you. And I had agreed to do that, and I'd even hung up the phone, but then I just could not get this thought out of my head, is like, they can get debriefs from anybody. Like, let me see if they will listen to me about my story. I don't even know what I was intending to do. Just like, I think this maybe worked. So I called him back. He said, okay, man, I guess I've never heard anything like this, but let's do it. And so I did it, and I had a pretty good response. And that's how I got the whole cleared connection, because there was someone up there that knew Andy Stump. And before I had arrived back home from giving my talk that day, I was texting with him, and he said, hey, I got word you should be on my podcast. You got a good message to share. And that's history, man. Things just snowballed from there. And like, I mean, it ultimately became full-time work to where, I don't advertise other than I have a social media presence, and then just word of mouth. I wasn't seeking out departments. I wasn't like sending things off. It was just, the message grew. People heard about me. I got some traction in New York, and then just things just kind of went almost overwhelming at times. But yeah, so it's been a good couple of years. So now, I travel the country, and I go to, whether it's conferences or I go to police departments hire us, and we have a full day training where we share a story and share some things that can help them, hopefully.
Well, that's why I first heard you on the Cleared Hot when it first aired, and man, I was stuck with it, because I was still. It was actually just before I retired, and I was still looking for answers myself. I hear, okay, so it's not just me. I knew it wasn't just me, because I had been not vocal, but kind of vocal. I wasn't hiding as much anymore, and I was talking about people, how they should get help. And here's where you can find help. It wasn't until after I retired and got still and started looking at everything and reading and listening more and on my own journey. But you were certainly there at the beginning to lay out some of the breadcrumbs down this path. And I've been following you ever since. And tell me a little bit about Boulder Crest, and then I want to go ahead and start wrapping up, because I've got a very important question that I really want to hear your answer to. But what's this new thing, a guide at Boulder Crest, man? This is your new deal.
So this is awesome. So I obviously have been doing the public speaking and sharing my story, and I went through lots of therapy. I did EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. You can look that up, but if your people listen, don't understand what it is. And it did a lot of work. The one thing that I was missing was a new perspective, not only from trials in my childhood, and then new perspective of all the things that I've been through. And I was connected with a person, up in the upper tiers of Boulder Crest, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, which they help veterans and first responders. And we did a meeting. They knew what I was doing, and they said, hey, we'd like you to go to one of our programs down in Texas called the Struggle Well Experience. It's a week-long immersive program, and just getting into your stuff and, just talking a lot about a lot of things. We don't tell too much about it because we leave some of it a mystery because it's good for you to go. But I went there, and I'll tell you, Doug, I had a life-changing experience. It was the one thing I'd missed about daily regulation, daily practices that I needed to not miss, that I needed to have a part of my life. And it was all revolving also around things that I've already been doing, making trust and connection, being willing to share your story. And I fell in love with the program. And even more so, it has been overtaking police departments. So they have a couple different programs. They have what's called the Struggle Well, which is they have a 2-day, a 5-day class where police departments are taking that on. My old department, Mesa PD, has adopted their entire program. Tucson PD in Arizona is actually the flagship police department that they have completely adopted this entire program, where from the academy and throughout the entire career, they're teaching them how to struggle well. And they specifically talk about how the trials, the struggles that we face create opportunities for growth. Instead of looking at them as why me, you look from a perspective of why. Because life is never, no matter all we do, no matter how much therapy we go through, life is still going to punch us in the face, right? Every single day, possibly. But if we can learn how to face those struggles and almost welcome them with open arms, knowing that it's going to be tough while you go through, but also understanding that as you push through that, there will be growth on the other side that could only be experienced due to the struggle. So I fell in love with it, man. And I asked, how can I get involved? And we went down this process of getting me training. I'm sorry for my cough, struggling from a cold, but
yeah, weren't you in Maine last week?
I was. And
okay.
I think
so I imagine it was cold. That's probably where you got your little cough from.
Yeah. Yep. So now it's worked into, I'm going to become a staple figure at their ranch in Texas. So I'll go there once a month to be one of the guides in this immersive program. And man, it is taking the first responder world by storm and the veteran community by storm. Actually, the VA is looking at it, as possibly new training, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of it. So that'll be a big part of it. I will not be speaking as much as I have been, going around all the time, but I do still have events coming up in 2025. But at least once per month, I will be down in Texas as a guide for Boulder Crest. So
that's exciting, man. That is exciting. You being a part of it and finding that yourself, being a part of it, and then it pouring out to other places. One of the big questions that I really, really wanted to ask you, and I want to set the stage for this. Anybody who's been listening to me, I've made it no secret that my wife, Michelle, was a pivotal, was the pivotal role in my journey, my life, and the reason that I'm here now. And I could never give enough credit or enough thanks for that. And I know Emily has been by your side, and I have been watching a couple of videos that y'all have done recently together, but in preparing and trying to settle my nervousness for this, it's like, man, I know everything there is to know about this dude. I've been following him for 2 years, consume everything that he puts out. But you squeaked one past me with the Blue to Green podcast where you and Emily were on together. And man, I watched bits and pieces of that, clips mostly, and I was like, I got to get more of this context. Buddy, and Emily, you have a partner that is absolutely fierce.
Yeah.
To see you two together, I love seeing it because I know the dynamic between the two of you, man, but only because I've experienced it in my household, and it just screams when the two of you are close to each other. Buddy, you've got a fierce advocate right there. I mean, that you have a protector, an advocate, and everything that you need in your house, your tribe. And am I off base on that, man? Has Emily been a huge part of this healing journey for you and the way forward?
Yeah, 100%. There's no doubt that God brought her into my life.
I love it.
Yeah, man. Because I needed that. I needed that fierce partner like you're describing it. I tend to have a pretty dominating personality, and a lot of people seem to be intimidated by me just from the way I carry myself and things, but not her. And I need that.
Yeah. That shows. Yeah, she ain't afraid, dude. She's not afraid of anything.
So yeah, she has been such an advocate for me to where, and she showed me so much about, taking care of myself and how important that is. And even, I mean, I would love to get her to speak more because she has a lot to say, but she doesn't necessarily like that role. In fact, she's going to be on Jeff Flores' podcast, I think, in not too long. And she's had other people ask, but trying to get her to embrace that. But she has a good outlook on all this. And she was a police officer for 16 years, so she gets it. She gets where we come from. But even this whole journey since I retired, her behind the scenes and supporting, and she has been my rock. Because man, sometimes it's not easy doing what I do, for sure. It is such a privilege, but I get contacted a lot by people who are requesting me to walk alongside them, and up to this point, I do so. But it gets heavy, and I wish I could do more. And I will tell you, that's a lot of the reason why I'm doing more work for Boulder Crest, because I still feel like I want to really be in the trenches helping and that connection. But she supports me, man. And like, I have to dump on her sometimes to where, like this last week at Warrior Path up in Maine, it's heavy, man. Like, there's some people carrying some shit, and I'm so honored to be a part of it, but sometimes it's hard. So I definitely need to lean on her, and she's there to take it and support me. I mean, dude, yeah, it's so hard to put into words, and sometimes I almost feel like embarrassed to say, because she's just she prepares for me to come home after I do these events. She knows things are heavy. She sets me up for success, and I could not do it without her.
No, it shows, man, just the way the look on your face when she starts to speak, and just the way you kind of glance over. I mean, it's absolutely evident to somebody who knows what they're looking for, man. And I'm so glad that you have that. That is a blessing. A side note, her being on Jess's Next Shift podcast, Jess runs a pretty good show.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to catch that one, man. I think that's gonna be one not to miss, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So Jess, if you're listening, here's a plug for episode whatever it is of this season. So let's close out, man. I know you got busy stuff and you got a cold to get over, but what's the way forward, man?
First and foremost, you got to be willing to share your story. And I think I said it earlier, it doesn't even have to be in a venue like this. If you're listening to this, because I've had people reach out to me, Doug, and maybe you have. If you haven't, you will. They're like, hey, man, how can I get into this space? What do I need to do? I don't necessarily have a formula for that. I never used to be like this. I am very much, I sit with things for a little bit, and when I feel at peace, I move. And that's what I do. And it's been right for me so far. Like this thing with Boulder Crest was not an easy decision for me, because I am limiting the My Arena stuff, but the doors had opened, and I know the impact that I'm able to make with my story within that organization and the people that we come across. So that was huge for me. And then a path forward for this whole movement of addressing mental health amongst the veteran and first responder community. I mean, you talked about what you're thinking about doing. If you think about legislatively and things like that, we need to educate the community, and we need to pass some laws that start giving our people the resources and the care that they deserve. And that in turn will create better first responders for our community. It will help people stay on the job longer. So, right, one of the biggest words we hear right now is retention, right? And then recruitment. We need to create a healthy environment, because, man, I've had knuckleheads before tell me, like, man, this PTSD stuff on law enforcement is all new. I will say, no, it's not. Because back at the beginning of my career, I saw people that are a train wreck, their lives falling apart, they're drinking too much, they're assholes on the street. And we just say, oh, that's just John. He's been a cop for 15 years. No, he's not navigating the profession very well because of the things he's having to go through, not to mention life in general. And if we don't give them the tools and resources and allow an avenue for them to come forward when they need to take a knee and say, I need a tap out for a second to help. I need some help. We'll just continue to have these problems. But I mean, at the end of the day, Doug, you and I both know, being in the profession that we were, as long as we were, so much of it comes down to funding. And when they start talking about these things, they're scared about, well, it's going to cost me this and it's going to cost me that. And I say, well, you signed up for those positions. You want to be the chief, you want to be the sheriff. It's your time to find that money. And You have taken an oath of service to your community to put out the best possible product, that being us, to serve them, to guarantee them that you are giving them a product that is healthy and they are dealing with their own trauma as well.
No, I agree with that 100%, man. And I've heard you say it before, and I wrote it down probably 4 times today and yesterday. It's not a matter of money, because you can always find the money. We find money for the dumbest shit.
Yep.
We're getting new holsters. Didn't we just get new holsters last year? Hey, do we really need new holsters? Or we're going to get decals to go on the top of our laptops. The money's there. Okay. It's the priority.
It's a priority.
You said it, the
100%.
downstream impact of having a culture and an organization that is safe for people to contribute. Once you're going to get a lot more experience, people feeling safe to contribute, to answer up, to lend their talents to the profession and not just answer call to call and try to get away. The retention is going to take care of itself. Making sure that people, when they come in, you have to get a medical physical and do a mental eval when you walk in. How come we're not doing that once a year as part of your medical package? Why don't we get a baseline of what your blood work looks like for over the next 25, 30 years? Why isn't there a medical or mental out process when you leave? Why is there not an EAP that's not attached to your insurance, but someplace in an adjoining county that doesn't report to you? Dude, there are so many things that can be done, and it's not a money thing, man. It's a priority thing. There's a lot of work to be done, and there have been strides made over the last several years, but there's so much work still needs to be done. And people that are not listening to this, you don't get to sit back. You're not doing something about this. You don't get to sit back and say, why? Why is because you've been sitting on your ass. You're not doing anything about it. That's the why. I'm going to have to go for a run, brother. Anyway, man, I appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.
This is a big treat for me and for my listener. I really appreciate you coming on, everything you're doing for the community, man. And it is an honor to be on this mission with you. So thank you very much for all you're doing.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, brother. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tell This Story. I hope you found today's conversation with Travis as insightful as I did. If you'd like to connect with Travis, you can find him at myarenallc.com or on Instagram at my_.arena. For more information on the Boulder Crest Foundation, Warrior Path, or Struggle Well experience, visit bouldercrest.org. A huge thank you again to Polestar Coffee for sponsoring this episode and our show. Fuel your mission with the best of blends. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Every rating helps us continue sharing these important stories. Follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or just go to DougWhiteOfficial.com for all our links. We'd love to hear from you. Share your feedback, suggest guests, or tell us about the topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in to Tell This Story, and remember, there's always a way forward. We'll see you next time.